It was a crisp autumn morning when the Supreme Court convened for a hearing that was set to reshape the course of American politics. The case before them was monumental, an issue that had the potential to redefine the very nature of the presidency. But no one anticipated the drama that was about to unfold. As the justices filed in, their faces a mask of professionalism, the tension in the room was palpable. But all eyes were drawn to one man, Donald Trump, former president and now the central figure in the courtroom. He was there not just as a defendant, but as a force of nature, prepared to unleash fury like the country had never seen before. John Roberts, Chief Justice of the United States, sat at the front, trying to maintain the order of the court. His reputation for impartiality and calm demeanor had never been challenged, until now. The case had been building for months, a legal battle that could unravel key decisions Trump had made during his presidency. It was a clash between the might of the executive branch and the power of the judiciary. But what no one expected was that Trump, the ultimate showman, would use this moment to deliver a blow that would leave even the seasoned Roberts at a loss for words. As the proceedings began, Trump, with his trademark confidence, stood up. The courtroom fell into an eerie silence. His eyes locked with Roberts, who tried to maintain his usual composure. "I don't know why we're here, Your Honor," Trump began, his voice booming. "This court has no right to challenge the decisions of a president, especially when that president did more for this country than anyone could have imagined. You've heard the arguments, and you're about to hear the truth. But you won't like it." Roberts shifted in his seat, attempting to regain control of the room. But Trump wasn't finished. He wasn't just there to defend himself, he was there to challenge the very foundation of the court's authority. "You've all been so busy playing politics," Trump continued, "that you forgot who actually runs this country. You think you can just sit here and dictate what's best for America. Think again." The room was thick with tension as Roberts opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He was stunned, speechless. This was no ordinary case. It was a battle for the soul of the country. And Trump wasn't about to back down. The silence in the courtroom felt deafening. Even the most seasoned reporters who had covered political showdowns for decades found themselves leaning forward, hanging on every word that Trump was about to unleash. This was no longer a legal proceeding. This was a spectacle, and the stakes had never been higher. Roberts, still frozen in disbelief, tried to regain his composure. He cleared his throat, an attempt to regain control over the now charged atmosphere. But Trump wasn't ready to let him off the hook. The former president knew exactly what he was doing, and he had come to make a statement. "I'm not just talking about me, Your Honor," Trump continued, his voice now more deliberate, laced with the kind of intensity that was his trademark. "I'm talking about every person who voted for me, who believed in the vision I put forward. You think they're going to let you sit up there in that chair and tell them they were wrong? You think they'll stand for you overturning the will of the people?" There was a pause as Roberts, clearly unprepared for this level of attack, tried to interject. "Mr. Trump," he began, his voice tinged with irritation, "we're not here to debate political allegiance. We're here to address legal matters. Your remarks are—" Trump raised a hand, cutting him off with a single, sharp motion. The audacity in the gesture only added to the drama unfolding before the court. He wasn't just fighting for his case, he was challenging the very legitimacy of the court itself. "No, no, no, John," Trump interrupted with a mock tone of familiarity, emphasizing the Chief Justice's first name as if they were old friends. "This isn't just about law, this is about justice. This is about the heart of America, and you've got the nerve to sit there and pretend like you're above it all. Like you're some kind of untouchable elite, and we're all supposed to bow to your wisdom." The courtroom murmured, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. The justices exchanged quick, uncomfortable glances, but it was clear, Trump wasn't done. He had only just begun. "Let's be real, John," Trump continued, leaning forward, his voice now a low growl. "You know what this is really about. This court, and people like you don't want to see a man like me, someone who's not a lawyer, someone who doesn't play by your rules, come in and shake things up. You want everything to stay the same, so you can keep pulling the strings. But I've exposed the lies. I've called out the corruption, and you don't like it. Robert's face reddened, but his lips remained tightly pressed together. The other justices sat in stunned silence, as if watching a lion pacing in a cage, ready to strike. Trump wasn't finished. He knew the power of a well-placed accusation, and he had a knack for pushing people into corners. "You've got your little establishment," Trump said, voice booming, "but I'm not here to play nice. I'm here to bring the truth into the light. And whether you like it or not, John, your time is up." The words hung in the air like an electric charge. There was no turning back now. Trump had taken the gloves off. And Roberts, the man known for his calm and unshakable presence, was left speechless. The tension in the courtroom was so palpable it felt like the walls themselves might crack. Donald Trump's words had hit with the force of a thunderclap, and Roberts, usually the epitome of judicial calm, was now visibly shaken. He tried to gather himself, but the damage had been done. The balance of power had shifted, and for a brief moment, the Supreme Court of the United States seemed less like an institution of justice and more like a stage for a political show. Trump stood confidently at the podium, watching as Roberts opened his mouth, attempting to regain control. I believe we should proceed in an orderly manner," Roberts stammered, his voice faltering. His words were a feeble attempt to reassert authority, but the damage had already been done. The crowd in the gallery, the reporters, the lawyers, the staff, were all hanging on every movement, every word, caught in the whirlwind that Trump had unleashed. For a moment, there was a brief silence as Roberts flicked through his notes, trying to maintain the illusion of control. But Trump's next move would crush any semblance of order left in the room. "Orderly?" Trump sneered, as if the idea of order was some absurdity. "You think this is about order? You think this is about law and precedent? This is about power, John. Power, and who holds it. You might sit up there in your fancy robes, but you're just another part of the swamp that I promised to drain. And I'm not here to play your little games." His voice echoed throughout the courtroom, his words dripping with contempt. It was as if every insult he'd ever hurled at his opponents, every sharp critique, was now being poured directly at Roberts and the court itself. "You want me to believe that you and your colleagues, people who've never stepped a day outside the Beltway, know what's best for this country?" Trump continued. "You want to lecture me about the Constitution? You want to tell me how things should work when you've never even understood what it means to live in the real world? Well, guess what, John? The people are done with you. They're done with your hypocrisy. They're done with your high-minded lectures, while the rest of America gets left behind. And that's what this case is really about. It's about whether the elites like you and your buddies get to decide who leads this country, or whether the people have the power to choose their own fate." Trump's words rang out, each one hitting its target with deadly precision. Roberts, his face now flushed with anger, tried again to speak, but the words came out jumbled and strained. "Mr. Trump, we are not here to discuss the people's will, we are here to resolve legal issues related to the case at hand." Trump shot him down with a withering glare, his voice a harsh, biting force. "Legal issues? You can dress it up however you want, but this is about control. This is about keeping the power where it suits you. I don't care about your technicalities. This is bigger than that, and you know it." At this point, the rest of the justices were visibly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, exchanging glances, but none dared to speak up. They had seen many high-profile cases, but none that had escalated like this. None where a former president, a man who had defied every norm, had come into their chamber and torn apart the very foundation of their authority. But Trump wasn't finished. In fact, it seemed like he was just getting started. He stepped forward, his figure looming over the courtroom, a powerful symbol of defiance. He wasn't just here to argue a case. He was here to make a statement that no one would ever forget. "I'll tell you what," Trump said, his voice softer now, but his words cutting deep. "You want to try and take me down? Go ahead. Try. But just know this, you'll never have the power to silence me. You can't erase the will of the people, John. You can't erase history. And you definitely can't erase me. The Chief Justice, looking defeated, seemed to realize in that moment that Trump wasn't merely battling for a favorable ruling, he was waging a battle for the future of the country itself. And it was a battle that had only just begun. The air in the courtroom had shifted from tense to suffocating. Every word Trump spoke now seemed to echo off the high marble walls, reverberating through the very foundation of the court. Roberts, the man who had once commanded respect in this chamber, now seemed like a mere shadow of his former self. The man who had once held the highest judicial position in the country was left struggling, unable to regain the upper hand in this explosive confrontation. Trump stood tall, unrelenting. His eyes locked onto Roberts with the kind of unwavering intensity that made even the most powerful figures tremble. There was no turning back now. Every second that ticked by felt like another strike against the establishment. The justices, their once imposing authority now slipping through their fingers, sat in stunned silence. You think you can control this narrative? Trump's voice boomed. You think you can silence me, discredit me, and just sweep my presidency under the rug like it never happened? Well, guess what? It's not that simple anymore. I didn't just come to make a legal argument, Roberts. I came here to expose the rot at the heart of this system. The system you've been protecting for decades. There was a sharp intake of breath from the gallery. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This was a direct assault on the Supreme Court itself, on the entire framework that held the country together. Trump wasn't just challenging Roberts, he was challenging the legitimacy of everything they represented. The justices looked at each other nervously. Even the conservative justices, who had once supported Trump, seemed unsure. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unable to reconcile their loyalty to the former president with the intensity of his words. And Roberts? He could barely meet Trump's gaze. But Trump wasn't about to stop. He could feel the power he had over the room, the power he had over the country. It was palpable now, and he knew it. You all sit there in your ivory tower, Trump continued, his voice dripping with disdain. You think you're untouchable. You think you're the guardians of justice, when in reality, you're just part of the establishment that's failed the American people. Well, guess what, Roberts? That's over. There was a pause, a beat of silence before Trump's words pierced the stillness. You've lost the people. You've lost their trust. And now you're sitting here, pretending to hold the reins of power. But you're not. You're nothing. And when this is all over, when the dust settles, the American people will know the truth. Robert's face reddened, and for the first time since the trial began, he appeared truly rattled. His jaw clenched, his knuckles white against the wood of the bench. Trump's words had cut deeper than any legal argument ever could. Mr. Trump, Roberts finally managed, though his voice wavered, this court will make its ruling based on the law, not on threats or political pressure. Trump smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was a cold, calculated smile, the smile of a man who knew he had already won. You think I'm threatening you? Trump asked, his tone now dark and mocking. No, John. I'm telling you the truth. You don't control the narrative anymore. The people do. The room fell into a hush. The justices were finally realizing the weight of Trump's words. This wasn't just about the case at hand, it was about something far larger. Something that could change the course of the country itself. And for Roberts, it was a sobering realization, the court, once the final word in American law, was no longer immune from the force of a man who had mastered the art of manipulation, the art of power. Don't think you can walk out of here unscathed, Trump finished, his words hanging heavy in the air. This is just the beginning. The word struck like a hammer, and for a moment, even the most seasoned legal minds in the room were unsure how to respond. The power had shifted. Roberts, once the authority in the room, was now nothing more than a spectator in the battle for America's future. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the tension so thick you could feel it in your chest. Trump had spoken, and in doing so, he had unleashed something that no one, not even the Supreme Court, could control. The courtroom was in chaos. The justices, who had always been pillars of decorum and restraint, exchanged uneasy glances, their once unshakable confidence now clouded by the uncertainty that Trump had just introduced into the room. The once quiet chamber, where decisions that shaped the country's future were usually deliberated in hushed tones, now buzzed with a low hum of disquiet. Trump's words, sharper than any legal argument, had left an indelible mark on everyone present. Roberts, his face a mask of frustration, slammed his gavel down with a force that rattled the room, but it was a hollow gesture. The usual sound of authority seemed weak now, like a cracked bell struggling to ring true. The Chief Justice's voice, when it finally came, was hoarse, betraying the anger and disbelief that had begun to simmer beneath his usual calm exterior. "Order!" Roberts commanded, but the force of his words lacked conviction. No one moved. No one dared to speak. Trump remained standing, his presence filling the space like a storm on the horizon, his eyes never leaving Roberts. His expression was almost calm now, as if he knew the game had changed, as if he knew the next move was his. "John, you can bang that gavel all you want," Trump said, his voice cool and measured, almost like he was lecturing a child. "But you're not in control anymore. You never were. The American people are watching, and they're going to know exactly what happened here today." The words felt like a weight pressing down on everyone in the room. The justices were silent, unable to respond, and Roberts, despite his attempt at regaining control, was visibly shaken. Trump had not only questioned the integrity of the legal proceedings but had also launched a full-scale attack on the very legitimacy of the court. It wasn't just about the case at hand anymore. It was about who held the power, who had the influence, and who would be left standing when the dust settled. And Trump, more than anyone else, knew that he was the one pulling the strings now. The room was eerily quiet as Roberts attempted to compose himself, his gaze shifting from Trump to the rest of the justices. They were all staring at him now, waiting for direction. But for the first time in his career, Roberts didn't have the answer. "Mr. Trump," Roberts finally managed, though his voice still trembled slightly, "this court will deliberate and issue a ruling based on the law, not on theatrics. We are here to uphold the Constitution." Trump let out a laugh, a sound that echoed through the room like a dagger cutting through the tension. "Uphold the Constitution?" he repeated mockingly. "You've been upholding your little system for decades, John. But it's crumbling now. People are tired of it. They're tired of being lied to by people like you, who sit up there pretending to be the voice of reason when all you do is protect your own power." Trump's words were a blunt force of truth, and despite the efforts of the court to maintain their usual composure, there was no escaping the reality he had laid bare. The trust of the people was slipping away from the justices, and the more they tried to defend their authority, the more they seemed to lose it. Roberts could feel the eyes of the nation on him, waiting for a reaction that might not come. "I came here to fight for the truth," Trump said, turning away from Roberts and addressing the rest of the room. "You think you can bury the truth under piles of legalese? Not this time. The American people are done with that. They're done with you." As he turned back to face Roberts, Trump's voice dropped, almost to a whisper, but there was nothing quiet about it. "Your time is over." The Chief Justice's face twisted in frustration as he opened his mouth to speak again, but Trump was already stepping away from the podium, his message delivered, his power asserted. There was nothing left for Roberts to say. Trump had left him speechless, his every word a dagger that had pierced the heart of the Supreme Court's credibility. And with that, Trump walked out of the courtroom, leaving behind a stunned, unsettled audience. Outside, the media frenzy erupted. News outlets, social media, and political commentators scrambled to process what had just happened. The narrative was already taking shape. Trump had done the unthinkable. He had not only stood up to the court, he had shattered the illusion of invincibility that had surrounded it for decades. The people were watching, and they were ready to follow whoever dared challenge the establishment. The media explosion following Trump's dramatic courtroom confrontation was nothing short of a spectacle. The moment the former president left the building, cameras surrounded him, microphones thrust in his direction, and reporters scrambled to capture the first words out of his mouth. The sound bites were already circulating, amplified by every news outlet, social media platform, and talk show. "Roberts is weak," Trump said, grinning widely as he faced the cameras. "He didn't have the guts to stand up to me, and now the whole country knows it. This is just the beginning, folks. The American people won't let him get away with it. They won't let any of them get away with it." His words reverberated across the country. Political analysts, commentators, and former presidents weighed in. The media was obsessed. Was this the beginning of the end for the Supreme Court's unquestioned authority? Was this a new era of political battles waged in the public eye, where every word mattered more than precedent? But it wasn't just the media that was buzzing. Behind closed doors, the true consequences of Trump's actions began to unfold. The justices of the Supreme Court met in private, the weight of the moment pressing down on them like an invisible force. They had always prided themselves on their neutrality, their separation from the political fray. But now, they were uncomfortably aware that they were not immune from the storm Trump had unleashed. Justice Clarence Thomas was the first to speak. "We can't just let this slide," he said, his voice low, yet resolute. "What he's doing goes beyond the case. It's about undermining everything we stand for. We have to respond." The room was divided. Some justices were visibly rattled, their faces betraying the unease they felt. Others, like Thomas, were hardened, determined to push back. But the tension was clear. The court was at a crossroads. John Roberts, the Chief Justice, sat at the head of the table, his fingers pressing together in a steeple. He had been quiet, lost in thought. He knew this was bigger than any ruling they had ever made. The power dynamics had shifted, and Roberts understood all too well that no legal precedent, no matter how well established, could protect the court from the full force of public opinion, not now. "I've been Chief Justice for a long time," Roberts said finally, his voice quiet but filled with a weight that resonated through the room. "But I don't know if I can keep this court above the fray anymore. We're part of a much larger battle now." And Roberts wasn't wrong. Across the country, people were divided. Trump's supporters cheered. The court had been put in its place. It was a powerful message that resonated with his base, people who had long felt that Washington elites, including the judiciary, had been ignoring their voices. Trump had given them a taste of victory, and they were hungry for more. On the other hand, many political pundits and legal scholars were alarmed. The integrity of the court, they argued, was under siege. By turning the judiciary into a political battlefield, Trump had thrown the very concept of impartiality into doubt. And Roberts, as the head of the court, was now in the hot seat. But it wasn't just the court that felt the pressure. The political establishment was beginning to fracture. Senators, governors, and even members of Trump's own party were unsure of how to proceed. Many had stood by him through thick and thin, but now they were faced with the fallout of his confrontation with the judiciary. How would they align themselves in this new, volatile political landscape? Can we allow this kind of disrespect to continue? Senator Mitch McConnell asked during a closed-door meeting with other Republican leaders. The Supreme Court is an institution we cannot afford to lose. But Trump's influence was undeniable. As McConnell and others debated, Trump's poll numbers surged. His base, fired up by his bold stance, rallied behind him with more fervor than ever. His approval ratings, once waning, had suddenly skyrocketed. In the wake of the courtroom clash, Trump's legal team was working overtime. The case at hand, once a procedural matter, had transformed into a spectacle. Trump's influence had overshadowed any legal arguments. His team was pushing hard for a favorable ruling, not just for his sake but for the sake of sending a message: the people, not the elites, should hold the power. Back at the Supreme Court, Roberts was feeling the heat. He had long been known for his ability to navigate the toughest political and legal waters, but now, with the legitimacy of the court itself on the line, he was starting to question whether he could continue to lead. That evening, Roberts made an unexpected decision. He reached out to Justice Thomas and a few others in the conservative wing of the court. He needed to speak with them, to find a way forward, one that would not only preserve the court's authority but would restore the balance of power that Trump had so effortlessly disrupted. The next morning, a statement was issued from the Supreme Court, though it wasn't much of a surprise. The court had decided to fast-track its ruling. The justices would convene sooner than expected, likely in the wake of Trump's continued barrage of public remarks. They had no choice now. The court could no longer afford to remain silent. Trump had forced their hand. And as the nation waited for the court's ruling, the sense of uncertainty hung over everything. No one knew what the outcome would be. But one thing was certain, the battle for control of the American political system had only just begun. The day of the Supreme Court's ruling had arrived. The tension was palpable across the country. The media was on high alert, cameras trained on the courthouse, microphones pressed to the faces of anyone who might give a hint about what the court would decide. It was no longer just about the case before them, it was about the future of the judicial system, the power of the presidency, and the very fabric of American democracy. Every decision, every word from the justices, would be dissected by millions. Trump had already made it clear he wasn't backing down. His influence had only grown in the wake of the court's delay. The media had turned the judicial battle into a political spectacle, and Trump had turned the tables, commanding the narrative. The justices filed into the chamber, their faces grim. Roberts, once the face of calm and authority, now carried the weight of the entire institution on his shoulders. He knew this decision would define his legacy and the legacy of the court itself. The question on everyone's mind was simple: could they still uphold their authority, or had Trump's attacks irrevocably altered the balance of power? As the session began, Roberts opened his mouth to address the court. His voice, though steady, carried an air of finality. "We are here today to issue our ruling," he said, before pausing, taking a deep breath. "This is not just about the case in front of us. It is about the very nature of our democracy, and whether we, as a court, can still maintain our place as the final arbiters of the law." Trump's legal team was already preparing for what they believed would be a resounding victory. They had used every tactic, every political maneuver, to sway the court in their favor. But what they didn't anticipate was just how deeply the justices had been affected by the relentless pressure from the former president. Roberts turned to read the court's decision, the moment of truth arriving. "In the matter before us," Roberts began, "the court has deliberated long and hard. While we understand the political stakes involved, we have arrived at a ruling based on the law, not on public pressure, not on political maneuvering." There was a collective holding of breath in the room. This was the moment where the future of the court, and perhaps the nation, would be decided. But what came next was a shock to everyone, perhaps even to Trump himself. The court, in an unexpected move, ruled against Trump. The decision was unanimous. The justices, despite the political pressure, had upheld their interpretation of the law, rejecting the arguments put forth by Trump's team. The ruling was a clear statement that the judicial branch would not bow to public opinion, nor would it be manipulated for political gain. For a brief moment, the courtroom stood still. Roberts's voice quivered as he delivered the final words: "The court's ruling is final. The power of the judiciary is not subject to the whims of any one individual or party." The justices knew what this decision meant. They had just stood their ground, and in doing so, they had preserved the integrity of the judicial system. The power of the court had been questioned, but now it had been reaffirmed. Outside the courthouse, the reactions were immediate. Trump's supporters felt betrayed. The very man they had rallied behind, the man they had believed could change the system, had just suffered a stunning defeat. For many, this was a betrayal by the very institutions they had come to despise. Trump's face was unreadable as he watched the ruling unfold on live television. His supporters were enraged, and many of them took to the streets, protesting the ruling, decrying the elites who had once again taken control. The backlash was immediate and visceral, and the divide between Trump's base and the establishment had never been so stark. But Trump was not a man to admit defeat easily. Within hours, he took to social media, posting a fiery message to his followers. "This court is weak. It has betrayed the people. But don't worry. We will keep fighting. The battle is far from over." Though his legal team had lost, Trump's fight was far from finished. He understood now more than ever that the political game had changed. The power struggle was no longer confined to the courtroom, it had moved into the streets, the media, and the hearts of millions of Americans. And Trump was prepared to continue the fight, to rally his supporters, and to find new ways to challenge the system that had so decisively rejected him. But for now, the court had won. They had withstood the storm, and in doing so, they had proven that the power of the judiciary, even in the face of unprecedented pressure, remained intact. The nation watched as the justices left the building, their faces set with the grim resolve of a battle fought and won. For Roberts, the victory was bittersweet. The court had endured, but at what cost? The division in the country was wider than ever. The political landscape had been forever altered by Trump's fiery rhetoric, his audacity, and his ability to turn every institution into a battleground. But for now, at least, the law had prevailed. As Trump walked away from the courthouse, he smiled. The ruling was a setback, but the war was far from over. And in the end, he knew, it was not the court that would define the future of America, it was him. And he wasn't finished yet.